Good evening. If you are watching this, that probably means that you weren't a part of our Zoom Live Hangout tonight, which I hope that changes. I hope that we'll see you next Tuesday night at 7:30. Um, but tonight we did something and interactive like we have been through Zoom. But we talked about doubt. And where we're going to be is in Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 14. But before we get there, a few things. I think there are stuff that we believe in. They're myths, legends, folklore, whatever it is. And I shared for me I don't know why, but I was just so enamored and really enjoyed the Loch Ness Monster. I went through a period of obsession with the Loch Ness Monster. I would watch documentaries, and I think maybe it was because it was based in Scotland, and I knew a lot of my family was in Scotland. And actually in middle school, right after my 6th grade year, the summer after, and I was going into 7th grade, my family actually, we traveled to Scotland to go visit family. And I remember the one thing I really wanted to do was go and see Nessie. So I didn't even know they had and I think I want to say it's still open. It was called Nessie Land. It was not necessarily like an amusement park, but it was like a theme park, basically. And I remember taking a boat ride, like out there on the water where, in the Scottish Highlands where Nessie was located. And I remember just being so enamored, and I was looking out on the water, but of course, didn't see anything. But I watched documentaries all the time about the Loch Ness Monster. I was fascinated with that. Another one that I was not as fascinated with, but always kind of wondered if it was real or not, was Bigfoot. And I remember I would lay in bed and I would watch Animal Planet, and there was a show called Finding Bigfoot. And it was a show basically about 5 people who spent their lives kind of searching for Bigfoot species, and they were probably, of course, partaking in way too many illegal substances in the process. But as ludicrous as it was, as crazy as it was, I was hooked on that show. And really, despite everyone's unbelief, at a time, I believed Bigfoot was real. Now, naturally, I started to experience doubt with the existence of those two things, despite the fact that, I was so sure of their existence when I was younger. And I think we've all been there. There are things that we believed in when we were younger that we probably don't believe in much anymore. Like, I used to 100% think that wrestling was real. Come to find out, it's scripted. It's a little bit choreographed. I mean, the things that they do, of course, can, hurt their bodies and things like that, and they can suffer injuries. But, when I was younger, I thought it was 100% real. And there are things, like I said, that I think all of us kind of believe and experience. And over time, I think we've realized that doubt doesn't just happen with myths, with legends, with stories, with folklore, but sometimes it happens with relationships. It happens with life. It happens with faith. Things that we are so certain of have recently maybe become these deep wells of doubt. And this is the struggle that we see here in this passage in Mark chapter 9. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 9. If you don't have a Bible, pause me and go grab one real fast. But where we're going to be is Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 14. And we're going to skip in this little story, but we're going to start in verse 14 and then skip to verse 16 and read through verse 18, and then skip to verse 20 and read to verse 24. But it's when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him into the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they couldn't. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, 'How long has he been like this?' 'From childhood,' he answered. 'It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us.' 'If you can,' said Jesus, 'everything is possible for one who believes.' Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, 'I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief.'" So Jesus is in a pretty difficult situation here. He has a difficult situation on his hands. This man's son is possessed by a dangerous spirit, this destructive demon, but Jesus' disciples can't even drive this demon out, and it seems like the scribes don't want to drive it out. So this father is experiencing, I would imagine, a whole boatload of emotions. And he's dealing with so many things, and he's been dealing with them for so long. And because of all these emotions, this man approaches Jesus basically to solicit his help. And in so doing, he reveals that he has doubts. Now, if you're paying attention to this passage and reading along, then you know that this man's son has been demon-possessed since he was a child, which means that this father has probably tried everything that he can to heal his son, but there's to no avail, really. He has not succeeded. And now here comes this Jesus guy walking around this region, bringing the very thing that this son needs, which is healing. And this father's got to be thinking, well, maybe he could do something about this. Maybe this is who this father waited for. But then, as doubt creeps in, maybe it's not. Maybe Jesus would fall short, and maybe he would be back to square one again. That's the doubt that this father was dealing with. He wanted to believe. I think he really, really did, but he wasn't sure if he could, which is exactly why he fell at Jesus' feet at the end of this story and said, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." And I know this might sound weird, but this is one of my favorite stories because of the father's raw emotion. Because at first when you look at this, and especially what this father says, "I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief," that seems like a contradiction. But I think this father was voicing a tension that I think a lot of us experience, especially now given the circumstances that we're under. And that is this. And if you want, this is what you're going to text back to me if you've seen this, and that is this. There's a gap between our knowledge of God and our trust in God. I'm going to say it one more time. There's a gap between our knowledge of God and our trust in God. Like I said, be sure to text me that so I know that you're following along so you can be in our drawing for the prize. But in other words, what I'm saying is there are things we know intellectually, but we struggle to believe. I think it's the difference between head knowledge and heart transformation. And I don't know if anyone has struggled with this before. I think many of us might be struggling with it right now. But for those of us struggling with this and really to understand what's going on, I just want you to know you're not alone. First off, But I'm going to give you some examples. You know God has a plan for your life. For some of you who might be trying to get into college, maybe you've been rejected. I have gotten a couple of rejection letters when I was applying for colleges. Maybe that starts to set up this doubt that, about the plan that you had. Maybe you know God has forgiven you through Christ, but you still feel constant shame. Maybe you know God is in control, but maybe one of your parents or both of your parents lost their job or are on furlough because of what's going on right now, and maybe you're stuck asking why. You're starting to see the tension that I'm talking about here. And if you've been here before, or maybe you're currently dealing with this, I'm going to encourage you that it's okay. Because at the end of the day, change is the process of belief moving from your head to your heart. This is where what we know becomes what we believe and what we trust. And I think we all go through this, probably more than just a couple of times through our teenage years. But through this story, through this father's raw honesty, we learned something very refreshing. And I think the thing that we learn is we don't need to fake it or fix it for Jesus. Because this father did not put on a mask and try to act like his trust was steady and unbreakable. He didn't pull out some spiritual toolbox and ask Jesus for a hand, but he begged Jesus to save his son's life and to change his own heart. This father was bold. This father was honest. There was no faking. There was no trying to fix things. And how does Jesus respond? In verse 25 of Mark 9, it says, "When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. 'You mute and deaf spirit,' he said, 'I command you, come out of him and never enter him again.'" Notice this as we kind of close. Jesus didn't rebuke the dad for his doubt. He rebuked the demon for his destruction. Which means this: if there's one thing you want to take away, that Jesus is more than okay with us dropping our doubts, our troubles, our unbelief, our fears at his feet. He doesn't want us to fake our way through our faith or try to flounder and fix our own problems alone. He wants us to run to him, to spill it all so he can sort through it and change things for the better. And listen, I realize that that is a very hard thing to do. But I think what I love about the story is the promise that Jesus will hear us and Jesus will answer us. And at this time, I asked the teens if they wanted to, if they felt comfortable with sharing some of, maybe things that they struggle with. They could put that in a little chat box. But for those of you that are following along and weren't able to be a part of our Zoom Hangout tonight, what I want you to do is write down any doubts that you have concerning your faith. And write down anything you need God's help with. Feel free, to contact me if you need to talk about them. That I'm here for you during this time. That there are people who love you and are here for you during this time, and realize that you're not going through this alone. That everybody is going through this. That everybody has these moments where they need their help. They need help with their unbelief. And so I hope that this gives you some encouragement, especially if you're struggling with this. And I hope that you will join us next week for our Zoom hangout at 7:30. And so with that, feel free to continue with checking our YouTube page for the daily devotionals that I leave on there. And then, like I said, we'll have our Zoom Live Hangout next week, and then I'll also post these lessons, so that way you can have something and still be able to follow along. But I hope that you have encouragement this week. I hope that it's a great week for you, and I'll see you next time.